Back to viewers, I'm George from Ireland. This is a video commenting on the knighting of Tony Blair. Forgive me, Sir Tony Blair, as I ought to call him. So he was First Lord of the Treasury from 1997 until 2007, also Minister for the Civil Service. Okay, he's Prime Minister in common parliaments. And then he chose to stand down. And at his resignation speech in the House of Commons, he gave a characteristically egotistical valedictory oration in which he says, like me or not, I'm still standing, I'm going at a time of my own choosing, that is that. And then he flew back up to Sedgefield, his constituency in northeast England, with his trademark brio and vanity to resign, which is completely unnecessary. Although, strictly speaking, you can't actually resign from Parliament. You can only take an office of profit under the Crown. They usually enter the Chiltern Hundreds as become Steward and Great Chamberlain of the Chiltern Hundreds, some sort of Crown estate in Buckinghamshire. And it's just the merest farce. And that is an office of profit of the Crown. I don't know if they get any money out of it, and they never even need to go to Buckinghamshire or do any work. It's a sinecure if ever there was one, and that's incompatible with an MP, so automatically they're out of Parliament. Because since the early 16th century, they couldn't, strictly speaking, resign. Sorry, 17th century. But so he's just been knighted, so he's now Sir Tony. I'm not sure if he's actually been to Buckingham Palace for the investiture. So what happens is the person kneels down and is touched on the left shoulder, then the right shoulder with the sword. I now knight you, Sir Tony. Arise, Sir Tony. And he stands up. But he's been made a Knight of the Order of the Garter. So I'm not sure if that dubbing ceremony with the sword takes place. Her Britannic Majesty used to knight people. And obviously, being a knight is different from being a baronet. Being a knight is for the individual, the lifetime of the individual. When he dies, his eldest son, you wouldn't get it. Whereas you're a baronet, it does go father to son, only to the eldest son, only to sons born within wedlock. Ain't that a bit racialist? It's inegalitarian. These days 50% of children are born outside of holy matrimony, so we can't be discriminating against people on the basis that they're conceived the wrong side of the blanket anymore, surely, or putting boys before girls. But so he's a Knight of the Order of the Garter. So I don't know if he needs to be dubbed for that. And Her Gracious Majesty often delegated to her sons and daughter to do the dubbing for her, because she's indisposed and she's only got so much energy, being 95 years young. I think Prince Andrew will not be showing his ugly mug in public, so he won't be carrying out these duties. Ideally, they'll lock away in some distant tower and never be seen again. So the New Year's Honours List, it is revealed on New Year's Day by tradition. And there are all sorts of other gongs which are handed out. Various people are knighted. So Prime Ministers, if they weren't already peers of the realm, they were offered a peerage when they resigned. They always used to take it. But the last one to take it was Baroness Margaret Thatcher of Kesteven. Randy Andy self-exiled at Windsor Castle. Well, it's not as bad as Supermax, where he could be receiving free bed and board for the rest of his natch. Anyway, back to Tony Blair. Well, John Major, he became Sir John Major. He was Prime Minister just before Anthony Blair. But Anthony Charles Linton Blair has finally accepted it. I mean, it's perhaps surprising he wasn't offered it beforehand. Maybe he was just behind the scenes, and he might have discreetly said, no, thank you, not now. Could you offer it to me later? Okay, we'll offer it to you later. So now he's been knighted. Anyway, the erstwhile Premier said he is elated to have been accorded this incomparable honour. But it's quite contentious. Over 150,000 people have signed a petition for the degradation of this knighthood, saying he's a dreadful Prime Minister. He perjured himself to the Britannic nation. So I guess not the only one who's awake at this hour. Well, I mean, I'm having this dream that I'm making a YouTube video. Oh my God, I am. Okay. So seems like not. This witching hour, I'm up. But I'm told that the optimum time would be, say, about 7 o'clock in the evening to do these live broadcasts, so I must bear that in mind. And various other gongs have been handed out to various people, sporting people like that Raducanu young lady, that 19-year-old Chinese-Romanian tennis player, Emma Raducanu, and the witty, the Professor Chris Whitty, who's the government's chief medical advisor, Professor Jonathan Van Tam. He got the Order of the Garter. So the Order of the Garter goes back to, I think it's Edward I, and some lady's garter fell off, and he picked it up and gave it back to her. Now, some people thought this might be a lascivious gesture. Is he trying to seduce someone who's married? But no, to obviate any suspicion, this was some sort of saucy gesture. He said, "On y soit qui mal y pense," because, of course, the English royal family spoke French as their primary language into the early 15th century. Shame upon him who thinks badly of it. And I say, this is such a respectable thing to do. I'll tell you what, I'll found an order of chivalry called the Order of the Garter. And Knights of the Garter put OG after the name, Order of the Garter. Lord Butler of Brockwell's one. Her Britannic Majesty herself was a Knight of the Order of the Garter. King Juan Carlos of Spain, well, the former king, he was it, and lots of other people get it. But there's a limited number. There are only about 20 at any one time. And at Windsor Castle, you can see little plaques on some wall listing all the people who have been made Knights of the Order of the Garter ever. Of course, many of them are dead because it's been going for centuries. And there's one day a year, like in late May, they have their jamboree. They all meet in St George's Chapel, Windsor, wearing their ceremonial blue robes and some hat with a big white feather and that kind of thing. So I'm not sure what earthly purpose it serves, but it makes them feel frightfully chuffed to be part of this very elite set. So various other people like, Trevor McDonald's been awarded it. But Tony Blair, the thing that will be etched on his tombstone is Iraq. Saying he had to ensure there were no weapons of mass destruction in the hands of the genocidal tyrant Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq. Now, there was evidence which was suggesting that Iraq possessed weapons of mass destruction in 2003. There was evidence suggesting that it did not. So Tony Blair tended to look at that evidentiary basis to suggest there were weapons of mass destruction, to exaggerate that, to decontextualize, to remove the caveats in that the intelligence services had provided him, and to put too much faith on single sources, to disregard more skeptical voices. Of course, 1991, Iraq signed that ceasefire agreement with many countries, including the United States and the United Kingdom, and they gave an inventory of all their weapons of mass destruction, biological, chemical, and so forth. They'd used them, killed about 3,000 Iraqi Kurds, civilians at Halabja a couple of years earlier, and working on nuclear weapons. So the assumption had to be that Iraq still had them. Remember, the onus was on Iraq to disarm in a verifiable manner. It had to be seen by the United Nations weapons inspectors. And if they didn't do so, of course, one had to assume they still had them. Why on earth would they play cat and mouse with the weapons inspectors for years? After 7 years, the weapons inspectors withdrew because they just weren't being cooperated with, not getting access to sites they want, not getting the documents they want, not getting to interview Iraqi weapons scientists, one-on-one or without minders. Of course, these weapons scientists, if you said the wrong thing to the weapons inspectors, you're going to be tortured to death by Saddam Hussein's secret police, Mukhabarat. So that's why, of course, Tony Blair, many people, the Egyptian government, the Jordanian government, people not sympathetic to the liberation of Iraq, assumed that Iraq had them and that the liberation had to go ahead because that was the default setting. But Saddam Hussein's policy was so moronic, I couldn't believe how he wouldn't have them, because there would be an advantage in disarming and proving you've done so. There would be an advantage in having the nuclear weapons and people knowing you have them, because it would scare people off invading. But not having them, but people believing you have them, there was no advantage in that, because it wasn't going to have a dissuasive effect on those who believed, who were considering invading or whatever, or you wouldn't actually be able to use them, if people called your bluff. So some weapons of mass destruction were found, but rather few. Some of the chemical and biological weapons, some missiles beyond a certain range. But no, it wasn't the full arsenal by any means. It seems he dismantled and destroyed his weapons of mass destruction program in the early 90s, but he didn't do it in a manner which could be checked by the UN. The Ba'athist regime, no, none so far as I know. So some people say Tony Blair, he got the United Kingdom to this completely unnecessary war. It could easily have been averted, and also he underfunded the military. I mean, I was in favour of freeing Iraq, but I think, but then you have to pay the price. You have to spend the money and give them the equipment they need. And you can't be penny pitching about this. Gordon Brown, the Chancellor Exchequer, wouldn't pay to desertify the tanks. There were some soldiers who were killed because they didn't have body armour that they should have had, and things like that. So, I mean, I think Blair was dreadful for all sorts of other ways, a constitutional vandal, an absolute charlatan. I think he wrecked education. He wasted so much public money. We live with the private financial schemes that he used for hospitals, or the public-private partnerships, which are going to costing us astronomical amounts, huge over-regulation, taking liberty, really depriving of our rights, bringing in hyper-regulation, a snooper's charter, banning thousands upon thousands of activities, criminalising people for doing really nothing wrong, bringing the surveillance state, making it a police state, trying to indoctrinate children into a liberal left ideology. All sorts of dreadful things Tony Blair did, but I actually do agree with him on liberating Iraq and Afghanistan. So that's my bit on Tony Blair. I've never met him actually, but I know his house is in Connaught Square. Want to film outside, the police say, well, you mustn't film us. That's it. He did bring peace to Northern Ireland. Well, no, I don't agree. The security forces did, the informers did, by defeating terrorism. The informers didn't always do it for high-minded reasons, but they still did it. Unsung heroes in ending that conflict. Okay, so everybody, so please, check me out and donate to me on PayPal, book online lessons with me. Toodaloo.